Hey guys, Tim here, Big Dog Forge. Welcome back. Glad to have you in the shop. Today we're going to do a 1,000 layer challenge Damascus. Viewer suggested that I do a 1,000 layer challenge, and I went online and took a look at this stuff. And honestly, I'm not putting 1,000 layers of duct tape on my head, or aluminum foil, or saran wrap. So Damascus I can do. So we're going to do that today. Appreciate you guys hanging out, checking it out, tuning in, and let's see how this goes. Thanks for stopping by, guys. We'll talk soon. Bye. All right, guys, we're going to start off with a little bit of time lapse here to get through this beginning. We're using our sawmill material, and we're cutting it in 1-inch strips. Didn't want to waste too much time on this. We're cleaning up the slag off the side from the plasma cutter. And the reason we cut them 1-inch wide is because we have some bandsaw blade that is made from 1095, and it's 1-inch wide that we're going to use with this. That length will let us fold it back on itself. So 15N 20 on the left, 1095 bandsaw blades on the right, and we're using 16 layers of the 15N 20 and 15 layers of the 1095. That'll give us 31 layers. And we're going to work our way up to 1,000 from that. All right, get these guys stacked up, and we're going to weld the dog dookie out of them because they're sort of flimsy on the outside, and they're going to bow and buckle under that heat as they try to expand. And we'll address that when that starts to occur, but we're going to minimize it as much as we can with these welds. And by the time we're done, those welds should be either gone or blended in. Shouldn't be able to see them at all. All right, get a handle on this thing. This handle I put on was a piece of 1/2 inch round, kept it short. There you go. You can count up the layers there. 31 of them. And should have put a little bit bigger handle on that thing. It didn't last too long, but let's get this thing into the forge. Okay. Get her in there and get her to warm up. And we've got hot spots in the forge, so part of this is going to warm up a little bit quicker than other parts. So we're going to have to keep an eye on it a little bit. We do get some expansion out of some of those outer layers because they are thin. But when they're malleable like that and they're expanded, you can compress them again, and they'll pretty much stay in place once you've tapped them back into place. That got a little hot. So we're going to go ahead and get some flux on, just a little bit of flux on it, not too much, you know. There we go. We get it back into the forge and let it finish warming up. Nice and delicate like. All right, this is our initial weld, 31 layers. And we're not going to draw this out too much. We started out with a 10-inch long piece. By the time we got the 3 welds in that I like to put in it, at a pretty good temperature, it stretched out almost 1 inch. So we're going to cut this thing at 5.5 inches. And I'm just going to use my little hand axe and a hammer to cut it. And all but one of our welds that we're doing on this, we're going to hot cut them and fold them. But we are going to stop and do a cold weld on one of them. So I'm going to get that thing back into the fire with some flux on it. Scrub that flux off real good on the welding surface. And we'll get her bent most of the way around and reflux it. There we go. Get this thing back into the fire before it cools down. All right, here's our 62 layers and our initial welds on that. So at this point, we have to start drawing this thing back down to get it back down to 10, 11 inches so we can fold it again. And it's some tough material, so we decided to grab this bottom fuller to draw it out a little quicker. And you can see our handle's getting a little floppy. And we actually welded it once, but it wasn't holding up too well. So I ended up grabbing a piece of 3/4 inch square, and I broke that handle off, and there was about, I don't know, 1 inch of it left. And I just tucked it up next to it and welded it to that and to the back of the billet. So it was much more substantial, and it held up pretty well. There we go. I'm kind of liking these short handles and using tongs with them. They're a little more versatile. You can move them around a little better. They don't stick out of the forge, bump into them, things like that. So we've about got this thing drawn back down. It's about 1 1/8 by about 11 inches long, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to hot cut it. By this time, though, I'm a little bit tired of this hatchet. So next time we get to this point, I think we're going to do something a little different. We'll get her back into the forge, flux on it, scrub that flux and all that scale off there. And that flux really floats that away nicely, gives you a nice clean surface to weld on. And we'll get some more flux in that gap. And at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to, because we have 62 layers and we're folding it, that's going to give us 124. So we're adding one to make it 125, and that's a piece of 15N20. So this will be our 125 layer initial weld. And again, we had to work it down, draw it back out. So I used a combination of the bottom fuller and the flat hammer to keep it sized correctly. And each time I folded this, it got a little tougher to fold. It's as if the metal was being compressed, and I'm sure that this was a factor in the guys in the old days that folded steel so much to sort of purify it, work out the impurities. I'm sure it had the same effect for them. Alright, so we're getting close to where we want to be, and we took this thing down to about 1 inch wide, just a little bit less than 1 inch thick, and about 1 1/8 inches tall. And what we're going to do is we're going to cool this guy down, and we're going to grind one side off of it because we want to check and see if our added layer in the center took. Because if we've got any cracks or fissures or anything like that in there, now is the time to find out before we go any further with this thing. And if it welded in nice and easily and even, it should reveal itself pretty well. But we'll see. We'll get this in here. And you're going to notice a little video transition on this. So I went in with it, and I got it down in there, and my vice grips kind of let go of it. It dropped in the bottom, and I had to fish it out with a magnet, so I didn't show you all that. Okay, we left it in about 15 minutes or so, and this is our result. You can see the wide 15N20 in the center. It's not as thin as everything else. And I could not find any fissures, cracks, inclusions, delaminations. You can see where it's welded into that fold right there on the end. And the whole thing looks pretty good so far. So at this point, we're not going to put it back into the forge in this condition. We're going to cold cut it. But first, I think we're going to stop and have some lunch. Yum, food. Alright, back to work, you lazy bum. Alright, we're going to mark this, and we're going to cold cut it and cold weld it. And we'll get it back in that way. That way we can get a nice even cut, stabilize ourselves. So, had it on the bandsaw for about 5 minutes or so, and this is about as far as it got. Bandsaw did not want to cut through that. Blade was a little dull, but by the time it got done with this, it was completely dull. Of course, I didn't have a cutoff wheel, so I went after it with just a big grinder, and it lost about 1/4 inch of material, but the show must go on. I have to finish the challenge. Alrighty, I clean up these sides, and I decided to clean the sides up that the handle was closest to, so we could keep the handle centered on the billet as much as possible. But during this process, they get all sort of, wonky anyway, so you can only do so much. Alright, she's all ready to go back into the fire. And we've been losing a little bit of material from the ends, the fire scale, grinding out a 1/4 inch in the middle. So our billet's getting a little smaller. It'll be fine. I get this thing warmed up. And we get some flux on it. One end got a little bit warm. I was a little concerned about that, but we let that heat migrate through the rest of it. Some flux on it, back into the fire. And we really only need, there's our 250 layers. And we've got quite a bit to draw down on this one. Now, like I was saying, we really only need about half the material that we're building here. But I wanted to build more than I needed in case something went wrong for this upcoming project that I've got going. And again, we use the bottom fuller to draw this thing out. And everything welded up just fine. And that little fuller and the power hammer did help draw that out much more quickly. So I was a little worried about it delaminating some of the welds, separating things. It never occurred. I never did run into any delaminations from that. Alrighty. So while it was heating up this time, I threw together this little splitter tool. It's a piece of leaf spring and a survey stake, kind of a thing. And put in the power hammer. It worked out awesome. So we get some more flux on it, scrub that down really well, and we'll get her bent over and get some more flux into that thing. And this will take us up to 500 layers. Almost makes it sound like we're halfway there, but there we go. There's our 500 layer initial weld. You can see the end towards the handle, how it's uneven and overlapped, and that's all going to have to be cut off later. So that will be some lost material as well. So our bar keeps decreasing in size. And I think through all of that, at the end of this thing, I lost just about 40–50% of the bar to that kind of thing. All right, so we got our little kiss block in there. We're trying to keep this thing somewhat uniform because we're getting close to where we need to be. And we want a shape that we can work with in the end. All right. So we're a little bit short of our 11 inches, but I'm a little anxious, and we're just going to go ahead and cut it. It'll be a little taller this time around. So we'll give ourselves a mark for our new splitter tool. I'm going to have to make a real one of those. That thing I made really quickly, but man, it works. All right. Check that out. That thing just goes right through it. I just love that thing. So much easier than swinging at that little hand axe. All right. So get this thing prepped up. Flux on it. Scrub the scale off. Hold her over for our 1,000 layers. Flux it up like crazy that time. Don't want anything going wrong on the last weld. There we go. There's our initial weld on our 1,000 layers. And it was so tall I was afraid at one point that it would fold sideways, but it was lined up pretty good, and took the weld really nicely. And then we just started working it down from there. And by this time, this material had gotten pretty darn tough, and it took a little longer to draw it out. And I tried to keep the temperature up, just below a welding temperature, to get it to move without delaminating anything, and it seemed to work out. All right. So we brought this thing down to, actually it was a little below 1/2 inch, close to 3/8, and then I think we're like 1 1/8 inches wide here. And what we're going to do is clean this guy up. We're going to scrub him until he cools down, get as much scale off that way as possible with that big old wire brush. And then we're going to go after it with the grinder. There we go. So I took a 36 grit soft discs, and I went after this thing. I didn't want to dig too deeply into it with the hard stone. I just wanted to get the flux and the scale off there and get it down to where most of the pits were gone all the way around. And we're going to get it over to the etch, and we're going to get an etch on this thing and see what she looks like initially here. And it looks a lot lighter than it did before, but I'm sure that's 15N20s just sort of packed so closely together. So you can see where we didn't compress it so much, but this grain is very, very fine, and it looks like a real fine wood grain. And you can see some dark spots running through the center there. I was a little afraid that was a little delamination between layers somewhere, but it wasn't. It ended up just being the surface of the metal. Scrutinized it pretty closely. But that edge pattern is really interesting. I really like that edge pattern. And I thought, wonder if we could rotate that so it was on the outsides and not on the edge. So, I think what we're going to do is we're going to take this thing and cut it into 3 pieces. We're going to stack them side by side and forge it down the other direction, so that edge pattern ends up being on the sides. Let's see what that looks like. Alright, we've already met our 1,000 layer challenge, and we went and got a new bandsaw, and it managed to cut through this very slowly. So we're going to stack these guys up, and we're going to forge weld that together, and then those edges, we're going to forge that down into the flat sides of the plate, so we get that edge pattern on the sides. I think it'll look a lot more interesting. If we were to grind through that fine pattern, we'd end up just simply with a fine pattern all the way through. So we'll tack weld it just on the ends. I don't want to put any inclusions on the sides at this point. Get a handle on this thing. We put a big old handle on it, another 3/4 inch square thing. I really didn't know how long it was going to take or how much pressure I was going to have to put on everything to get this thing all forge welded to where I wanted it to go. And of course we're taking a huge chance here, because it may not forge weld. We may end up ruining all the work that we just went through. But I'll leave you in suspense. Alright, let me get some flux on this guy and bring him up to welding temperature. 1,000 layers side by side times 3. Now I don't believe this constitutes 3,000 layers since they're side by side. I think it's just 1,000 layers 3 times. And we gave it some really good welding temperature and kept it fluxed up for quite some time. My worry was that when I started forging on those edges, that it would delaminate the block. The billet would fall apart. And they didn't want that to happen, so we kept it pretty hot through most of the process. And I wasn't getting enough width out of it. So I decided I needed to draw it out using the bottom fuller. And I thought if anything's going to go wrong, it's probably with this. But no, that was fine. Here's where the problem came in. I built this little thing while it was heating up, just out of a piece of round that I had. And it's kind of a flatter upside down kind of thing. It's got a little more curve to it. So after I finished fullering it this way, I pulled it out and took a good look at it. And yeah, it actually worked out pretty well. After we had fullered it, and our handle started breaking off because we got so narrow by that handle. And I was tired of welding handles on, so at this point, when it finally broke off, I just grabbed it with a pair of tongs and kept swapping it end for end. Sorry about the elbow there. Yeah, it's about ready to drop. So We got a little 3/8 inch round bar as a kiss block, and this thing ended up being just about 1.25 inches, a little bit less wide, and we got our 3/8 thick out of it. I figure we're going to have to grind the sides. It'll end up a little less than that. So there she is. And we did take a hard stone to the edge of this thing, just to knock the scale off. It was built up pretty good from all that flux, or the flux off there. And then we ran soft discs over it and got it over to the belt sander, and I think this was a 320 grit belt. I wanted to get all the grinding marks out and see truly what this thing would look like in the end. Because at this point, you know, we met our challenge. We're just having fun. And things are sort of deceiving with Damascus. You can grind and you can belt grind, and everything will look perfect. You won't see anything until you get it into the etch, and that's when things are revealed. So let's go etch this thing. And this is what we got. You can see the 3 billets that we stacked together, and this is that pattern that would have been on the edge, but now it is on the side. And because we were working with, you know, long skinny strips of scrap, we have to deal with what we have. And there's 1,000 layers compressed down into about 1/4 inch. And this is the other side. Looks kind of cool. I think I like it. I think it'll work well for the project I've got upcoming. Alright guys, let's get back into the office and have done with this one. Hey guys, how'd you like that? Not too bad, huh? So 1,000 layers Damascus challenge worked out. I'm very happy about that. I couldn't have done it without Scrappy. He did an awesome job. All the tools, everything held up really well. It was a good long day. It was 8-9 hours with lunch in the middle there, and it was a task, but it came out really nicely. I like the way it looks. I like the pattern that came out in it, and it's good to be able to say that, hey, you know, I made 1,000 layers of Damascus. I don't know if I'll ever do it again, but it was fun. I had a lot of fun doing that. So if you're going to try this yourself, be prepared. It is a long day, and have lots of borax handy, because lots of welding. So anyway, we got a series of tong videos coming up real soon, and I'll have some more information on those. Lots of folks have been asking if they can buy tongs, and I'm going to give you more information later on. That'll probably be next weekend, something like that. Anyway, I wanted to thank all you guys for tuning in, checking it out, and all the comments lately have been really awesome. I really like that. You guys are cool. So if you liked it, click the like, share, subscribe. I appreciate it. Thanks guys. Have a really good one. We'll see you on the next one, and leave me your comments. Let me know what you think. I appreciate it. Take care guys. Be safe. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.